Thank you, everyone, for joining us for the fifth session in our EE Global webinar series. We're hosting a series of webinars in lieu of our EE Global Forum this year, and we hope you will join us for our remaining sessions. Our next webinar will be July 29th and will be the first of 3 Accelerating the Recovery sessions, with the first one covering buildings. We will take a break in August, but we'll resume in September with several other great topics, including sessions on grid interactive efficient buildings, financing for climate and energy efficiency, city-level coordination on efficiency projects, and 2 more Accelerating the Recovery sessions focused on cooling and industry. You can view the recording of this session and past sessions, as well as information on the upcoming agenda at eeglobalforum.org. I note this will hopefully be a very interactive session, and we encourage those watching to submit questions using the Q&A function on the bottom bar of the Zoom screen. So not the chat function, but the Q&A function. Those questions will be forwarded to the moderator and the panelists, and we hope to be able to address everyone's question through the course of today's webinar. Now let me introduce our moderator, Ava Berardinelli, an Italian national. Ava is a graduate of Bologna University in Italy and the ISCTE IUL in Portugal, where she completed her MA in Development Studies in March 2017. Prior to joining EuroAce in the Renovate Europe Campaign in February 2020, she started her career as a Schumann trainee at the European Parliament and then worked in a pan-European association representing EU property owners. It's my great pleasure to introduce Ava, who will introduce our distinguished panel on today's webinar. Hope you enjoy it.
Thank you so much, Clay, for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone. This is Ava Berardinelli, and I work for Renovate Europe Campaign, which is a political communications campaign with the ambition to reduce the energy demand of the EU building stock by 80% by 2050. We are settled in Brussels, but our network extends across different EU member states. It is really my pleasure today to be your moderator for this really interesting and most of all timely event. Why did I say timely? Well, as we are slowly exiting this current health crisis, governments are in the process of designing the measures that would support our economies in getting back to their feet. Considering that already this century has experienced one deep recession, the first questions that our panelists today will answer is how can we leverage experiences stemming from the past 2 stimuli packages, namely the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act and the European Economic Recovery Plan, and turn these challenging times into an opportunity for our economies. Another important question that our panelists will try to answer is that what role energy efficiency has played in the past recovery packages, and according to past experiences, both of course positive and negative, which role can play now as we plan for stimulus and recovery investments. So as already mentioned, the 2 panels today will both represent the European Union and the United States. And as we have 1 hour, I strongly advise, as of course Clay said, to type in your questions in the Q&A function below. So let's dive into the content. In the first panel, who is representing the European Union, and I'm delighted to introduce to you the first speaker, who is Yamina Zayeb, a senior advisor at OpenX, and she will be speaking about the lessons learned from the 2009 European Economic Recovery Plan. Yamina, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Eva. Good afternoon or good morning, everyone. Thank you to the organizers for the opportunity to join this discussion. And I will give you an overview of what we learned from the previous crisis in Europe, the 2008-2009 crisis, in terms of triggering a market for energy renovation in the EU. So before the crisis, the European building market was mainly dominated by the construction of new buildings, which is the case, I think, almost everywhere in the world. So we had a maintenance market, but we did not have a renovation market. When we had the crisis, several EU countries and the EU itself designed stimulus packages, economic packages, targeting specifically the building sector. And we see this in countries where the building sector was specifically targeted, a change in the shares between the construction of new buildings and the market of renovation. So in 2009, we already had, as we see here, the renovation market became, the shares of the renovation market became equal to the one of the construction of new buildings. That was the first time it happened in the EU. Over time, starting from 2009, so in 2010, we started seeing that the renovation market was overtaking the market of the construction of new buildings. And this is particularly true in countries like, for example, France, Germany, Italy, where countries, member states, have combined the stimulus, the economic stimulus package to avoid the collapse of the economy after the crisis, with the implementation of the EU 2020 climate and energy targets. For the American audience, so we had our first climate and energy targets adopted in 2008, and the implementation started in 2009 in our countries. And the aim was to reduce our primary energy consumption by 20% by 2020, and to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And this is a big change actually. And what we see today, from 2010 to 2019, this is the last year for which we have data, is that the renovation market is every year taking a little bit more in terms of shares in the overall building market. And this market, the renovation market, is mainly driven by energy renovation because of the implementation of the energy requirements. So basically, the policy intervention has been able in Europe to create new markets which did not exist at all. However, when we dig a little bit deeper in this market, then what we see is that the market we created is actually a market of what we call shallow renovation, because what we do is that all the measures are targeting single replacement of, for example, windows, boilers, etc. So we did not have the market that we have today. Is not a market which allows to renovate fully. It's not a market targeting full renovation of buildings, despite the fact that actually public finance, the EU, when we combine the EU and member state finance, is around 20 billion euros for the period 2014-2020. I use this period because for us in Europe, we have a cycle for EU funding, 7 years EU cycle. However, we have two big issues with this new market that policy intervention has created. It does not target deep renovation. Less than, today we know from the European Court of Auditors that less than 0.5% of the buildings renovated during this 10-year period are deeply renovated. So basically we lost the savings potential. And then the other major issue is that we do not assess, member states cannot assess the real contribution of public finance to energy savings, because we don't have yet monitoring system that allows us to make this assessment. So these are the two major issues that we need to work on for the next decade. And the next decade, we have a target in Europe. It's already in the directive adopted last year to make the overall EU building stock carbon neutral by 2050. And today we have a discussion on the climate law, and the climate law aims to make Europe the first region in the world that would be climate neutral by 2050. In practice, what does that mean for the building sector? It means we need to renovate 210 million homes and 8.5 billion square meters of non-residential buildings. So this is really a huge market. However, to make these existing buildings in Europe carbon neutral, we need to make sure there are 3 actions that really need to be taken, put in place. The first one is that from policy perspective, we need to make sure that the energy and climate requirements related to buildings, which are included in 16 EU policy instruments, is what the policymakers should do. And then from finance perspective, what we need to do is that to find a way to bundle all the different financing schemes that we have. They don't come, some of them are from the EU, some of them are from national funding, etc. And to make sure that the public finance is used only for buildings that are renovated with an objective to be positive energy buildings, because that's the only way to make sure that the overall building stock will be carbon neutral by 2050. So this is for financial, an action for financial institutions. And the last action is for industry. The current industry involved in the renovation of the building sector is not what I would call an energy renovation industry. It's more a component industry. And what we need to have is that industry works together, all these component industries work together to innovate and put in the market solutions that would allow to make the EU building stock positive energy buildings. These are the three main recommendations that we have after 10 years of experience in markets that have been completely triggered by policy intervention. Over to you, Eva. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Yamina. So the next speaker, I believe she has just joined us, is Pernille Weiss. Pernille is a Danish member of the European Parliament representing the EPP group, and she will share with us some news on the current policy debates taking place in Brussels around the recovery plan and the role that energy efficiency and energy renovation of buildings has in it. Pernille, over to you.
Thank you. I suppose that you can hear me now. I can only see a black screen and myself in the corner. So since the time is very, very limited, also thank you for sending me the link to participate on this very important afternoon that you are having. And I know that Adrian will help me to get the input coming from this afternoon, as I cannot be there myself more than the time that I am actually just holding the floor for saying very, very shortly that we last Friday, or it's a week ago, yes, we made a very, very big compromise in an initiative report called the Maximizing of the energy efficiency in the building stock. An initiative report chaired by a Green colleague, Kieran Cuffey from Ireland. And it was a pleasure actually to work with this initiative report as the first but very important ramp-up to the renovation wave, where we address not only high ambitions but also addresses a kind of a mapping out what are the essential parts of a toolbox to improve and increase energy efficiency in the building stock. And I'm very happy that we almost all agreed to compromise, and also to do it in a balanced way, a realistic way, where we not only say, we just need to put the building into the ETS and then everything is okay. And we only need to agree on binding national targets, and then everything will turn up in the end, because we know and we agree to respect the fact that energy efficiency and the renovation of our building stock takes a lot of different measures. There's a lot of different incentives and challenges linked to both national states profiles. It's on energy mix profiles in every member state. It's also the building stock in itself. We don't have the same kind of typology language cross-border in EU. There's the financial incentives, and then there is this very important link to the renovation recovery package, which is also still hot and not yet sealed on the table here in Brussels. That what is the economy in the recovery package, and how can we take the renovation wave and put it in as a kind of a centerpiece for making the recovery of Europe by working with energy renovation and the building stock. So that was very, very important and a good step forward. If I should highlight some of the keywords from this initiative report, I would say that cost efficiency is a keyword that was very important for my political group, as well as also for the S&D. And then also, of course, technology neutral. We cannot say that enough, because it's very, very important to be technology neutral to as high extent that it is possible, because we need the market and the researchers and the innovative SMEs to find together and put forward the best and most sustainable in every mean solution to the building owners and to us as users. And that is a part of the text. Also, life circle approach, very, very important. And so to secure this SME life circle innovative approach and foundation to renovation wave, I myself is very proud that all my colleagues from the other political groups, they agreed on an idea coming from my side to have in the future a climate calculator that can enable the European companies to articulate an evidence-based, very, very clear message to the market about the CO2 reduction and the contribution from every kind of technology to building and renovation, coming with a labeling of a sort. We don't know yet how it will look. It will not be a burden. It will be a catalyst and a kind of a branding tool to European companies working with energy efficiency. So look out for the EU climate calculator in the future. And that is also a way of using the recovery package and the renovation wave to actually strengthen our job creation, our prosperity, and the EU's role model and our ability as a continent to move the globe, so to speak. Also, I would like just shortly to say that we also in the text have agreed to ask the Commission to step up, speed up the design of a renovation passport to every building. It is still still under the develop and under assessment in different member states, but we would like EU to have a common shared kind of passport language that can enable us to learn even more cross-border, cross typologies in how to do energy efficiency improvement, and also when we do that, improve the life quality and the living quality of our building stock. Then, as a final word, I will say that just to make you sure that is also sewed in to the initiative report is smart integration. There was a webinar last week where it was questioned and put forward many times that it's so important for increasing of the energy efficiency, and that we have and that we strive towards smart integrations, smart technologies in the building stock. And I can say that there are 17 words on smart integration in the initiative report. So we will also in the future hopefully see that not only do we have a renovation wave that is very ambitious, and it will be it will be a centerpiece of the renovation wave, but it will also be a very concrete place for EU to do the digital transformation, which is side by side with the green transition, also one of the very, very big challenges that we have embarked to deal with in EU, that we see this bridge between climate innovation and digital innovation and transformation and outrolling of digital tools, also on work, on jobs, so that the lack of skills in the digital in a lot of SMEs can be done while we also increase the energy efficiency through the renovation wave. So I look very much forward to launch this report when it's been voted through the House here, and also to see the next step after the summer break for us to really get a grip on the renovation wave and begin to make real legislation and not only intentional policies, which is good, but it doesn't change the world, and we need to do that. So I guess this was my time on the schedule, and it's also the time that I, sorry for that, have available. And again, I would like to underline, I very much thank you for taking this important initiative this afternoon. And I know that Adrian and his good people around will help me to get all the input coming from your talks later on in this event. Thank you, EuroAce, very much for inviting me.
Thanks a lot, Pernille. So we will move forward now to the next speaker. Before actually moving to the next speaker, I would like to remind you to still type in your questions in the Q&A below. It's my pleasure to welcome Peter Sweetman, who is the CEO of Climate Strategy and Partners. Peter today will tell us a bit more about the role that energy efficiency and energy renovation of buildings should play in our recovery plan. So more of a future outlook. Peter, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Ava, and thank you so much to Clay and the colleagues of EE Global for having this transatlantic webinar. I've been a very frequent participator to your Washington-based conferences over the years, and I always very much enjoy the dialogue which you create. So I've been asked to talk about the future, but I can't resist to use the past as a way of providing us lessons. History doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes, which apparently Mark Twain said. Europe's Green Deal indeed rhymes with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's New Deal that helped America emerge from the Great Depression from 1933. Through the New Deal, FDR managed to save capitalism, restore faith in democracy, renovate the reputation of government, and set the USA on a course of increasing prosperity and equality of opportunity for decades. It was Michael Gove's Ditchley lecture, which was published this Sunday, June 28th, from which I borrow and quote the 3 tenets of the New Deal's success. The first was building from the bottom up. Throughout his political career, Roosevelt had been concerned by the plight of the poor and vulnerable. Reform was needed, and he argued that builds from the bottom up and not the top down. In our European Green Deal, I think FDR would welcome the Just Transition Fund and be sure that it had enough grants to provide dignified and energy efficient homes for those at risk of being left behind by the energy transition. Furthermore, he would be well aware of the 18 local jobs per €1,000,000 invested that are uniquely provided by buildings renovation as a destination for recovery funding. Secondly, he asked for a change in structure, ambition, and organization. Roosevelt established new purposeful bodies which his voters could understand, such as the Federal Emergency Relief Administration, the Public Works Association, the Civil Conservation Corps, and the Agricultural Adjustment Administration. He took risks to break the mold of the past with ambition in scope and honesty in assessment. Today, I think FDR would have backed a dedicated European buildings renovation fund, as called for by so many sector organizations, whose new structure, ambition, and organization would finance a wave of renovation to connect up and amplify all the good work being done on the ground by so many regional and local initiatives. As such, we need bold and persistent experimentation, also from today's policymakers, in a transition which is no longer linear. Third, empowering reformers. FDR empowered Harold Ickes, Henry Wallace, Harry Hopkins, Francis Perkins, Louis Brandeis, Hugh Johnson, who were drawn from different traditions, backgrounds, and disciplines. They were set missions to act and achieve real and concrete changes in the lives of others. In Europe, we have missions, and we have the need to empower the right people and dedicated teams with tools they need to deliver. Green banks are a successful model that started in the UK and now work in New York, Connecticut, and Hawaii. Our European Investment Bank is undergoing dramatic reform to emerge as Europe's climate bank, and its new energy lending criteria are a positive start. We now also need it to embrace being Europe's buildings renovation bank and act as a fund of funds to channel EU resources and empower successful teams on the ground in 27 member states to double and triple their workloads and deep renovation projects funded. As you can see, the future's not all about finance, yet a Marshall Plan to renovate Europe needs a coordinating financial actor that's fit for purpose. As colleagues from incoming European presidency Germany know, their KfW's renovation funding packages have, over the last decade renovated 4 million German homes with 100 billion euros of finance that has supported 320,000 jobs a year. We need 2 KfWs of renovation in Germany, and every member state needs their own that fairly blends public and private finance at source and makes renovation offers via trained, accredited, and funded professionals via local networks of banks and retail outlets for all Europeans. I will end with 4 recommendations, which I made to Commissioner Simpson to finance the upcoming buildings renovation wave in Europe. We need a production line approach. The preparation and oversight of millions of additional annual renovations, deep renovations, will drive cost efficiency, knowledge, blending efficiency, and the optimal use of public funds like never before, blended at source but offered locally. Secondly, we need to use existing channels. We can identify many renovation programs like KfW, Credex in Estonia, Slovak Investment Holdings, VIPA in Lithuania, the Czech Renovation Program, Poland Modernization Program, and funds like PF4EE that have cracked the code. We just need to increase their volumes. Thirdly, we need the priority identification of vulnerable communities by member states. Vulnerable communities need to be identified by the competent local authorities through a nationwide exercise of priority building identification. This exercise can be done through long-term buildings renovation strategies, of which 10 are now in their second round as submitted to the EU. And finally, direct from the real estate profession, simplify, simplify, simplify. EuroASAR hosts or co-hosts identified over 100 financial and fiscal instruments for renovation across Europe. And in 2015, we filled a whole annex of EFIG's landmark report with them. There are too many, it's too complex, people don't know where to turn. 3/4 of EU buildings need to be renovated over the next 30 years Interest rates have never been so low. Buildings owners need the renovation sector to present fully funded offers which resolve public and private monies together with eligible grants to a single point, and not to overload an already hard decision with unnecessary administration and complex financing choices. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, Peter. That was really inspirational intervention. So for time reason, I would actually prefer to go on to the next panel, who is actually comprising experts from the United States. I would like to introduce you to the first speaker in line. She is Lisa Jacobson. She is the president of Business Council for Sustainable Energy. And Lisa today will focus on the role of clean energy companies and the potential in terms of job creation that lies behind investments in energy efficiency in the months ahead. Lisa, over to you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to commend the Alliance to Save Energy for having an amazing webinar series. I've watched many of them and look forward to the ones in September. So it's really a privilege to be part of this panel. And, you know, between our speakers, there's so much that I would like to associate myself with and the BCSC. I mean, so I'll try to hit some of those points in my remarks, but I appreciate Ornella and Peter's comments, and particularly the role of public-private partnerships and the need to leverage what the private sector is doing as we're thinking about renovating buildings as well as other initiatives to accomplish through our economic recovery. So the Business Council for Sustainable Energy is a trade association based in Washington, D.C., and we represent energy efficiency, natural gas, and renewable energy industry. We also represent energy storage, transportation, utilities, public power, manufacturers, and so we're a very broad set of industries that have come together to promote policies that support the development of commercially available energy technologies. I'm very proud that the Alliance to Save Energy was a founder of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, and Nestler, the intern, sits on our board. So we work very closely together as we try to think about both, you know, provide immediate relief and also think about our economic recovery opportunities with energy efficiency. So in my comments, I just wanted to highlight kind of a current snapshot of where the energy efficiency and clean energy sectors are as it relates to jobs, given the challenges that we have faced in the last 3 months. There has been research done looking at overall the U.S. energy job sectors, and that work has been done now independently through our Department of Energy and through other parties using same methodologies, and we know that at the end of 2019, clean energy sectors overall represented 3.4 million jobs throughout the United States, and we're poised for continued growth. Obviously, we're in a pandemic and a crisis, and during that period of time, spanning March through where we are today, there have been restrictions on many activities, including business operations, impacting energy efficient sectors. While some of the industry, manufacturers or utility initiatives have been essential in the United States and many parts of the country, the residential sector has been hit really hard, and that's true for renewable energy as well. But energy efficiency, lost over 430,000 jobs in the last 3 months, according to this independent research. And clean energy sectors overall lost 620,000 jobs in the last 3 months. Now, we're not talking about been furloughed. We're talking about people that have applied for unemployment insurance. So we are hopeful that whatever measures our country takes, it's safe to reopen, that we will be able to those people back to work and get back on our growth footing. One other comment I'll make, the federal level, there have been many initiatives in the United States to support different aspects of the business community. And small businesses, clean energy sectors, 70% of them are small businesses. So for small businesses, there was a paycheck program put in place. It's improved time, and we're very appreciative of that. But we fear, because when we look at the data, we see that many of the companies that took advantage of the Paycheck Protection Program were in the construction sector, that the overlap with energy efficiency businesses will be significant. And we anticipate, as that program ends and transitions into its new phases, that we could see, which is going to happen, at the beginning of this month, really, beginning end of June, beginning of July, we're going to start to see in August and September, when the data comes through, that there could be many more jobs lost. So we got to watch this closely. But now transition in my last few moments, we have opportunity, as was discussed by the other speakers from a European perspective, to take this time and have good, high quality jobs, and also put another down on our goals for the environment and climate change. I wanted to just highlight a couple of principles. Well, there's four. Some of them were said in previous panels. As we think about federal opportunities, I think number one, we need to be thinking about public-private partnerships and leveraging private capital. I really appreciate Nila's comment about technology neutral. And what I hear from energy efficient businesses at all levels, from large ESCOs to the small businesses, is they want to work with their customers on what the best solutions are, and they don't want to have overly prescriptive policies. So we reflect that at all levels of the DCSC. We need strong targets, we need clear market signals, and we need to allow the right solutions to be put in place. So creating market signals that are have a long-term impact, it was my second comment. And then finally, we need to have diversity and inclusion as we think about moving forward. So making sure we're building in the certification programs, the workforce training, and work for employees that may be in hospitality or areas where jobs will not come back, allow them to enter the clean workforce. And also be thinking about those that might need assistance to be able to take advantage of those programs. There's legislation at the federal level now, supported by Congressman Bobby Rush, green job workforce training that provides support to allow people to leave jobs or pay their bills while they're doing the training, and I think it's essential. So last, as the specific solutions, we learned from the Recovery Act that if the existing proven models, we should use them. And when we think about the tax code, or we think about research, development, and deployment, we have many rich, robust programs to point to. I'm sure we're going to hear from that. And then, just to highlight a couple of initiatives that the Alliance is championing. I mean, they have a number of tax initiatives, and those are understandable to the private sector and to consumers. So I think we need to look at those and improve them forward. There are specific grant programs aimed at small businesses that the Alliance is supporting. There is critical infrastructure, public-private partnership, performance contracting, leveraging initiatives where we would use some federal dollars and would leverage it with private capital to do energy efficiency in critical facilities. I'm sure we'll hear more about that. There are opportunities to direct investment to federal buildings, and also challenge the federal government to do more. And I've done that before. It has been very effective. Those are just a few things that I hope to talk about a little bit more in the Q&A to look to help renovate buildings, that accomplish our goals, and help our economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lisa. So the next speaker in line is Timothy Onra. Tim is currently the Executive Director of the National Association of Energy Service Companies, although Tim has also served as Deputy Assistant Secretary of Renewable Power of the Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy Office at the US Department of Energy. So his intervention will focus on the impact that investment in energy efficiency generates on industry, with both a federal official and leader of Association of Service Providers point of view. So Tim, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Eva. So Lisa, thanks for mentioning performance contracts in your talk. And Peter, you You set the high bar with starting off with a rhyme. I don't have any rhymes in my presentation, so I feel like I'm a little gonna let you down already from the start. Well, good morning, and to some of you, good afternoon. I'm Dr. Timothy Unruh. I'm the Executive Director of the National Association of Energy Service Companies, which we often call NAESCO. For those of you who don't know us, NAESCO is a national trade association, 35 years old, that represents the U.S. Energy Service Company, or ESCO, industry. Our 45 ESCO members deliver more than $6 billion worth of energy efficiency, demand response, and customer site renewable energy projects every year. Almost all of them to large government and institutional customers. Our members' projects range in size from about $500,000 to more than $100 million. Our projects are financed by a robust, competitive private market that employs a wide variety of debt financing structures, from term loans to special purpose entities. There's a large secondary market because our $50 billion of historical financings have proven to be good investments. Some projects use small amounts of rebates from utility ratepayer programs. Government grants, sometimes tax credits, are available for some projects. These funds, these public funds, they're leveraged typically 4 or 5 to 1 by private investors who are repaid from the savings the projects produce in energy performance contracts. The primary lesson we learned in the recovery from the Great Recession is that the short-term goals of government recovery programs should be designed to contribute to the achievement of the long-term energy policy goals. A principle that seems obvious, but can easily get lost. We all know that energy efficiency can provide as much as half of the greenhouse gas reduction that we need, and that the multi-trillion-dollar cost of this energy efficiency is more than governments or utility ratepayers can afford. We also know from the run-up in the stock and other investment markets over the past decade that there is an enormous amount of private capital scouring the planet for good investments. So we suggest that the key to achieving our long-term policy goal of greenhouse gas reduction is channeling private investment into proven energy efficiency investment structures. Our experience in the United States is that these investments don't need to pay huge returns because investors are competing to supply the capital we need for low single-digit returns. When we look back at the Great Recession recovery programs in the United States, we see that they not only failed to stimulate the private investment that we need, but actually hindered that investment in the markets that we serve. In the 2009 to 2012 timeframe, the federal government invested almost $15 billion in grants for energy efficiency in government buildings. And the result of that was about $15 billion in projects with almost no leverage. Why did this happen? 3 major reasons. First, the primary goal of the federal programs was to put people back to work as fast as possible. Government agencies were urged to implement shovel-ready projects. Agencies that received grants had to report monthly on their expenditures, and the faster the better, and their performance was published and graded on the web pages of the Federal Office of Management and Budget. Government agencies, from the largest military bases to the smallest rural school districts, stopped using performance contracts, some even replacing fully developed performance contracts with cash procurements. One service even used the grants to buy out old financing contracts, which in the end produced no new jobs and no energy savings. Second, we learned that facility managers think that energy performance contracts, an example of the kind of comprehensive energy we need to achieve our greenhouse gas goals, are too much work and too risky. Energy performance contracts require a change in mindset that requires a focus on building operations for the term of the contract, which is typically 15 to 20 years in the United States. And they know that government auditors come along every few years to determine if they've maintained their focus and the projects are actually producing the savings. It's much less risky and easier to just buy a lighting project for cash. This problem was so acute that we had to commission one of our national laboratories to produce a study showing agencies how to maximize the net present value of federal dollars. Third, the federal government failed to do the prep work necessary to facilitate government agency compliance with required labor standards and Buy American rules for equipment purchases. Provisions that are spot on if you're trying to put Americans back to work. The labor standards were addressed by trying to simply apply the National Davis-Bacon Act, which is politically problematic and practically not enforceable in many states. Meanwhile, the government never produced the list of what equipment could be purchased from U.S. manufacturers and what equipment was not readily available, and instead tried to deal with the Buy American requirements with short-term waivers and individual project reviews. That is hardly practical for the size of the recovery program we need today. So NAESCO, working with the Alliance to Save Energy, tried to distill what we've learned 10 years ago into a proposal we call Mission Critical Facilities Renewal, which has been introduced as the Open Back Better Act of 2020 by Senator Tina Smith and Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester. The bill recognizes that public facilities, as much as roads and bridges, are a critical infrastructure and positions energy efficiency as a way to pay for infrastructure improvements, not an end in itself. Mission Critical Facilities Renewal is designed to leverage a $22 billion federal investment into about $110 billion of improvements that will make our public facilities safe, secure, resilient, efficient, and flexible. It may seem like a lot of money, but it really is only a small down payment on the estimated $1 trillion of improvements that our public facilities need. Thank you.
Thank you a lot, Tim. Now I would like to give the floor to the next speaker, Stacey Paradis. Stacey is the Executive Director of Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance, and she will look at the past into the ARRA to see which role energy efficiency played at the time, the missed opportunities, and its potential both at regional and state levels. Stacey, over to you.
Great. Thank you, Eva. I appreciate it. And thanks to the Alliance and to everyone for being here today. I know I'm the last speaker, so I'm going to try to go quickly. I am here from Chicago, so good morning to my friends in the States. Good afternoon to the folks across the pond, as they say. I am the Executive Director of the Midwest Energy Efficiency Alliance. We are one of 6 regional energy efficiency organizations in the United States. But MIA's focus is really, we're a key proponent and resource for energy efficiency policy, and our goal is to really help educate and advise a diverse range of stakeholders on the way to pursue a cost-effective energy efficient agenda. And I think that was a very important point brought up earlier. That's one of the huge advantages of energy efficiency and makes it bipartisan and really work to both sides of the aisle is the cost-effective elements of it. And we do a number of things to really curate the conversation, focusing on the benefits of energy efficiency, not just the economic ones, but the environmental ones as well. Again, that is another reason that energy efficiency becomes something that works on both sides of the aisle, which is important because in the Midwest, in the footprint that MIA works in, we're 13 states across the region, and the majority of those are Republican-controlled legislatures on both sides, and more than half of those are Republican-controlled governors, which means also the regulatory commission. So we need to understand how to message efficiency to talk through the benefits to both political parties here in the United States. A couple stats I wanted to share, so I apologize for the numbers, but I think it's really important when we talk about what the stimulus package is going to mean in the Midwest now and what the ARRA did 10 years ago. So right now in the Midwest, our investment, again, in MIA's 13-state region footprint. So for those of you that know the states, we start at North Dakota, go down through Kansas, across through Missouri and Kentucky, and then up through Ohio and Michigan. So we have rural, we have urban, we have a little bit of everything. Energy efficiency right now in 2019 was a $1.85 billion investment. Now the majority of that, $1.5 billion, was focused on electric programs. And again, these are ratepayer programs. $324 million was related to gas. And the interesting thing in that is 534,567 jobs is the report that came out last week. So that is just the energy efficiency jobs. More than 500,000 of those are in the Midwest. And of the entire clean energy workforce, which is about 744,000, more than 70% of those are energy efficiency jobs. So again, when we talk about economic recovery and getting people back to work, that is why everybody's here today talking about what energy efficiency can do and why these policies are so important. But Lisa noted before about the job losses. She's exactly right. In the Midwest alone, we had 131,000 people that have filed for unemployment from our industry just in the last 3 months. These are, again, as Lisa made the great point, these aren't people that have just been furloughed or have had their pay cut, which has also happened. These are people that have lost their jobs. So we really need to focus on what is that pathway to recovery going forward. But a couple things I wanted to note before we talk about what happened in 2009. The other thing that I think is really interesting about energy efficiency are the type of jobs that are a part of it. Lisa mentioned this as well. More than 70% of all energy efficiency industries are small businesses. And in the Midwest, we define that as people with 20 or less people working for them. This is the backbone of the American economy and really the backbone of the Midwest. The other thing that I think is really interesting when we talk about energy efficiency is in the Midwest, 11% of those jobs are people that are veterans, which is twice as much as we've had in the United States. So that's a really good focus as we talk about diversifying the industry and how we can bring different job sectors to life. Now, how does this compare to 10 years ago when ARRA went through in 2009? So again, we're just under $2 billion investment in 2019. In 2009, the investment was just over 500 million. So you can see we've had a huge explosion in our industry, really tied to state policies that have passed here in the Midwest. But when ARRA came through, what was so different last time? ARRA in 2009 was a $2.86 billion investment. So it was a 5-fold increase in the energy efficiency investment in the Midwest. What that meant was they were able to create a lot of new programs. It wasn't necessarily complementary to the work that was already happening. And that is something I think we want to focus on going forward. As we look at the stimulus options that are on the table, and I think we've already heard Tim go through them and Lisa go through them and a number of things that are put forth by the Alliance to Save Energy, we need to focus on complementary programs. How can we complement both utility-funded programs and existing state programs that are happening? Because we don't want to, Tim was exactly right. It didn't just happen to the ESCOs where we just kind of threw money at a problem and really didn't ensure that that investment was as strong as it possibly could have been. So that is something that I really want us to focus on. We were also going to make sure the advantage of energy efficiency programs, and we need to educate folks at the local, state, and federal level, is how flexible these programs can be, how we can really adjust them to work to make sure that they're serving our rural communities, our suburban communities, as well as our urban cores, which are all been impacted substantially by COVID. So what is the best plan forward? How do we need to get people back to work? So we need to focus again on knowing how to talk about energy efficiency. Let's talk about the environmental benefits. Let's talk about the economic benefits. Let's also talk about the societal benefits. A lot of our friends from the European Union were talking about the building stock and the existing building stock. How can we work to make sure that those building stocks are improved? What is the health and resiliency of that building? And how is that going to help not only those homeowners, but how is that also going to help those businesses exist, and how are they going to advance going forward? So those are the key things I'd like to take away. The other things that I'd like to share, again, it's all about complementary programs, figuring out how to work together. And I think we also need to pay attention to equity. We need to understand, obviously with COVID, we've had a disproportionate impact on folks that are of lower means and of low income. They tend to be in building stock that's not as strong. So as we look at programs going forward, how can we ensure that those investments for those folks that are most disproportionately impacted are at the front of the line to get benefits? And with that being said, thank you for your time.
Thanks a lot, Stacy. So unfortunately, due to time constraints, our Q&A session will be rather short. So I would like to ask one really important question to conclude our discussion today to all our speakers, which is, what is one word of advice on how the US and Europe can actually collaborate to make energy efficiency part of the recovery packages? So to answer this question, we will follow the original order of business. So I will start with Yamina, going to Peter, and then we'll have Lisa, Tim, and Stacy. Go ahead, Yamina.
Yes, thank you, Ava. I think there is a lot to learn for each region from the other one. And if I would give what we learn from each region, actually. So Europe is more advanced in the design of the policies, and Europe is advanced because we have already proposal for the climate law, and we have several EU countries where we already have carbon neutrality targets set with a timeline. So for sure, from this perspective, from policy design, EU countries have a lot to share with the US, but also with the rest of the world. We will probably, I'm convinced that at some point we will overcome the inconsistencies that we have between different EU policy instruments because our main priority is to become the first economy, carbon neutral economy in the world. This is what we could take from the EU. And then when I look at the US, as an analyst, I think the US has been more innovative in terms of business models, more creative in terms of financing. And I think this is something that there are now some experiences in the EU trying to implement lessons learned from the US financing schemes. And this is what the US this is what we could learn from the US, or what the US could bring to the EU and to the rest of the world. Thank you. Over to you.
Peter, go ahead.
So I think we should just call a spade a spade. And what that means is if you've got finance for buildings, just call it finance for buildings, get it into buildings. But to Tim's point, make sure that you're going to blend at source. And what that means is don't force the difficulty of administration to the buildings owner, do it in advance so you can offer public and private financing in one package.
Go ahead, Lisa.
Okay, you know, just very briefly, I think the alliance and these types of partnerships, the private sector and the collaboration, many of these large, we're talking about ESCOs, excuse me, the large ESCOs are global or have global connections. So there's a real opportunity to have the private sector lead and create a much stronger market signal globally, as you know, not just in the United States and in Europe, but take it into other countries.
Over to you, Tim.
So we both have something to learn from each other. I think Yamina said it best. Europe has some pretty nice policies to encourage efficiency, and the US can certainly learn there. But I think Europe has the opportunity to learn about financing structures and how to manage debt to work with the private financing industry that the United States can bring over there.
Thanks so much, Stacey.
So I guess this means I get to be the last word, which is exciting. So that never happens. In any case, I think when it comes to the European Union, there's a lot of things on the building side, on working with existing buildings as well as new buildings, I think that we can really learn and benefit from here in the United States. But the thing that I would encourage all of us to think about is, however your policies are done, be it federally here in the United States, across the EU, in Europe, we need to do that with an equitable lens. We need to do that in looking for, again, those folks that have been most disproportionately impacted by this pandemic and how we can really help to support them and support those smaller businesses going forward. That's the best thing that we can do for our local economies and the global economy.
Thank you so much, Stacey, and thanks every speaker. Really, it was a really interesting and really good discussion. So now I'll give the floor to Adrian Joyce, the Renovate Europe Campaign, for the wrap-up conclusions. Adrian, over to you.
Thank you so much, Eva, and thank you to EE Global and to the Alliance to Save Energy for co-organizing this seminar with us. We hope that it's been highly informative. I take away from this conversation a number of things. Number one, we both live in a region of the world that has complex governance. In the United States, you have a federal structure with high member state individuality. In Europe, we have a union that has not got the same scope for influence as in the United States. And yet the similarities are also striking. We both see that the pandemic has created great damage, and we both see that we have an opportunity now to move forward with good policies, with robust financing in order to get onto a climate neutral path in our case, and onto a path where greenhouse gas emissions are significantly reduced in the United States. And I was very struck in the presentations how the language around the structure of the sectors is so similar, because in the EU, the structure of the construction sector is also made of micro enterprises, those of less than 20 employees. So the backbone of our economy is equivalent to the backbone of your economy. It means that the complexities of rolling out a program and putting in incentive schemes and in getting the information about them out to potential customers are very similar. So I think we have lessons we can learn together. And we in Europe have looked jealously at the ESCO market in the US for some time. Your market, Timothy, is at about $6 billion per year. I think in Europe, we're hardly at €100 million a year. So the potential is huge. And maybe a last thing, because I'm conscious we've run over time with such rich presentations. Another thing that I was struck by was how we both feel that, in your case, the federal level, and in our case, public buildings, could lead by example. And now that we're mobilizing a great deal of public money, there's an opportunity, in our view, to get public buildings to be the front runners in order to help get the economies rolling again. But in doing so, we must learn those lessons that Timothy pointed out from the previous recession, and that is that when we use public money, we must leverage private money at the same time. And you spoke about a leverage factor of 4 to 5. In some cases in Europe, we can leverage to higher margins, up to 15 times. And maybe there are techniques that we've used for leveraging private funds that you could learn from. So I feel going forward, there could be quite a rich conversation on how we can learn to hold hands across the pond. And I hope that we can find a mechanism maybe to continue this conversation either offline or in a future exchange. So I will end now by saying thank you so much for our wonderful speakers, for the insights they've given us. I hope the audience have enjoyed it as much as I have, and I wish you all a great day. So thank you again to the Alliance to Save Energy and to EE Global.